Imagine a world where Science Nights gets it right on the first try.
On the great ship of the imagination, I guess that's where we're going. Hey, that kind of works. Welcome back to the Science Nights. I'm Josh.
I'm John.
I'm Adam.
And today we're devoting an entire episode to the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Carl Sagan. For a lot of us, I think it's, well, for me, it's he's the reason that I wanted to start doing a show like this. After having went through and watched not only Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos, but then watching stuff with Carl Sagan leading up to what led up to Cosmos and his own Cosmos, which I still need to watch. But
I watched part of episode 4.
Heaven or Hell?
Heaven or Hell was very good.
Yeah.
We learned what happened at the...
that comet.
The Russian incident.
The
I
Russian
can't remember the name. It's tricky. It's in Siberia. That's all you need to know. He didn't lead me to anything other than I just find myself when he talks, like when I watch videos of him speaking on stuff, I feel like I'm doing this all the time, like
Yeah, that is correct.
Amen,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah, right.
Like, you know, it's all very sensical, like it all just makes sense. Like
I believe him.
Why doesn't everybody think like that? Like that just, you know, it just seems like duh.
Well, it's this, you lay it out plain, and he doesn't shy away from using technical jargon or anything like that. He lays out the truth, and then he gives it to you in examples that are just like, of course that makes sense.
My favorite example is his example of the Cold War. He's like, you have a room, and 2 people in that room, and in that room,
As
gasoline
gasoline
is spilled all over the floor, and one person has 9,000 matches, and the other person has 7,000 matches. You know? Both people have way more than enough to do the job at hand.
Yeah.
You know? And basically,
That's awesome.
he's like, we need to get rid of the matches and clean up the gasoline. You know, and he's talking about stockpiling nukes, and I'm just like, wow, that's a good way to put it.
Well,
Definitely.
what about you, Adam? Why are we doing an episode on Carl Sagan?
Well, I agree with you that he probably was definitely a huge influence in starting a show like this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's just, you can always listen to him. Like, he's very, very good at talking and very good at, even though like you said, he still uses technical jargon. He makes it easy for people to understand.
Yeah.
Like me, the layman.
No, for me too, dude. Like, it's that I.
If any of them spoke in like the true terms of their science, we would be like, the who'd you what it?
Well, if they're like talking to each other, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Like, and I was sitting on a chair beside them, like looking at him and Neil deGrasse, like the what's?
The Holiday Hoobie Woody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just talking to my brother Eddie, is an engineer. When he tries to explain stuff to me that I was like, we talked about PID controllers. And I asked him to explain it to me, and he wrote like...
Oh, yeah, he gave you that, like,
10
3-page,
paragraphs, man, on freaking Facebook Messenger that just left me like, what? He's
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, I took a picture of the equation, and said, does that make sense to you? And he's just like, yeah. And that's all I really wanted, but then he broke it down to me, like, completely, and, like, it was really cool of him to do it, but I was just sitting there, and I was like, are we related?
Although not the first of the scientific communicators, Sagan is definitely probably the first popularized one because of the era he was in, right?
Yeah.
Television
Was ramping up into, it was past the 60s and 70s of television sitcom, and they were starting to learn, oh man, you can use television to tell more than a joke or show off a variety show.
Well, and just live shows and everything were so much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And he could go around and talk, and like, now, I mean, live shows are still huge. But they're filled with crap most of the time.
Sometimes I will give Stephen Colbert. He puts on the physicist Brian Greene sometimes.
Oh, nice.
I like that guy.
Yeah, Brian Greene's cool.
But let's dig a little bit deeper into Carl Sagan, the person, Dr. Carl Sagan. He was born in November 1934, and he unfortunately passed away in December of 1996 after a 2-year battle with mild dysplasia. Is that what it is?
I was 8 years old.
I was 9. I don't know, why did I have such trouble with that? I was 9. Yeah.
I was 13.
Oh, old man. You've dated yourself, sir.
So Sagan actually attended the University of Chicago, which is one of the few colleges that he wanted to apply to. But he did so because it's one of the few colleges that would accept a 16-year-old into a BA degree.
Nice.
That's pretty exceptional in and of itself.
Yeah, he went to college
I'm so
at
smart,
16.
I just need somebody to let me shine. He got a degree in nothing, right?
Yeah, he called it, I got a degree in nothing, just general schooling. But then he got a BS in physics a year later, and then he went on to get a master's degree in physics, and then in 1960 he earned a PhD with his dissertation, Physical Studies of Planets, submitted to the Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics. This guy, and then after that, his scientific background was based in astrophysics, just like looking into Venus and the atmospheres in Venus and stuff. And he started because the postulation at the time was, is Venus perhaps livable?
Right.
And so he and his colleagues at I think at Cornell, where he was teaching, or at Berkeley, where he was a Miller Fellow, he just started diving into Venus. And it's like he's a scientist first, and I love that about him.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I was trying to look up his IQ, but apparently...
Does that even matter anymore?
No, I was just curious, though. Like,
IQ is not a very accurate measurement
Of intelligence?
No, not at all.
But it still would have been interesting.
Even though the first thing in IQ is intelligent quotient.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you want to...
I do want to, because I don't think we want to harp on it too much, but I do want to, before we get too far away from his death, he actually died of pneumonia, though.
Oh, really?
He got over that form of cancer that he had.
Really?
And it's actually kind of sad, because there's an interview on YouTube that says, like, it's Carl Sagan's last interview.
Oh, it's with Charlie Rose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in it, he talks about getting over the form of cancer that he had and the battle he had with it. And now that he's getting better and having a new outlook on life and stuff like that, like you know.
Yeah.
And then it ended up being, I believe, like 6 months after that interview that he died of pneumonia. He also talked about how he feels lucky living in the time that he did, because if he was born maybe, 10, 20 years earlier, he probably would have died from that cancer, because
medical developments
have grown. And I always think that's kind of sad, because I feel like
pneumonia's
the same thing applies,
right?
If he was born 10 to 20 years later, he probably would still be alive. He could have very likely survived that.
Yeah, pneumonia still kills people every year, though, because in
absolutely,
weakened bodies,
absolutely,
it's a tough one.
And it did. I mean, I'm sure it had to do completely with that. That he wasn't. He was still fairly skinny, and he was still recovering from, I'm sure, all the treatments and stuff.
I had pneumonia.
I remember
last year,
but
this year.
if you haven't ever watched that interview, it's worth checking
with
out.
Charlie Rose. He's really emaciated.
It's a little sad.
Yeah,
it's a little sad by the end of it.
He's balding,
you
skinny.
will cry.
I'm not a crier. I don't know if you know me.
You will say that, but you will.
Dude,
You'll be watching by yourself in your room.
As heartless as I want to be sometimes, there are definitely things that hit you right in the feels, man, where, like, you look around your room like,
all right, while we're talking about hitting it right in the feels, Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot speech hits me in the feels every time.
Absolutely.
But
kind of like a
good way,
like an empowering way.
So we can describe it. We can describe it all we want. How about we just play it for the audience real quick?
Sounds good.
Here's Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot.
From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest. But for us, it's different. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on the mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
It's actually taken directly from the book Pale Blue Dot that he wrote right after releasing Cosmos. I love that speech. I think the best line in it for me is he says it underscores our need to be kinder to each other or something like that. It underscores our responsibility to treat each other better, essentially, and to take care of the only planet, it's like the only shot we've got. But I loved the Pale Blue Dot speech. It's actually, when we first met Steven, that's what he did in his presentation, is he played that first.
No.
It is. It's
always inspiring.
Yeah,
so.
It's uplifting. And again, I'm going to go back to one of those head nodding moments where it's like, why can't we all understand this? You know? Like, you're fighting over nothing.
Or
Literally nothing.
Think of the rivers of blood over, like, what is it, a speck?
Right.
A fraction of a dot.
Yeah.
And it is, when you put it in that perspective, you're just like, what a petty thing.
Pale Blue Dot was released in 94. But the Pale Blue Dot image comes from Voyager 2. And Voyager 2 was something that Sagan worked directly on with NASA. I want to touch on Voyager 1 and 2 here real quick if we can. He
absolutely.
also helped...
almost like his legacy.
Yeah.
Somewhat, you know.
Not only
some of the things that he did for it and with it.
Yeah. You know? I don't know if he was a project director on Voyager 1 and 2, but he was definitely heavily involved with it. He was also on the Mariner 2 team as a planetary sciences consultant. But for Voyager 1 and 2, he helped develop the record that's on the the spacecraft. The gold record that shows like a strand of human DNA and also plays like selections of human sounds and music.
Right.
Which I freaking love. And
Human
famous
sounds.
What?
Like, what kind of human sounds?
Like a mother, what is it? A mother cooing her child?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, aren't most of those available on SoundCloud?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we talked about that on Waiting for Players.
Oh yeah, the record is available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all the sound clips that are.
Oh
on
shoot!
there.
I'm also glad we're talking about it right now because today, as of recording, they fired up Voyager's rockets for the first time in 37 years.
really, for...
Yeah, I don't know why, but NASA just released the headline. I didn't get a chance to read the
Wow,
story.
I didn't read that at all, but now I'm very curious.
Yeah.
Give it a little boost. Can't be slowing down, right?
No, it's speeding up.
It's speeding up, yeah.
So now they just want to speed up more. They're like,
So
we're not getting fast enough.
The story is Voyager just fired thrusters it hadn't used since flying by Saturn in 1980.
Voyager 1? Or Voyager 2?
Voyager 1.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. At present, Voyager 1 spacecraft is 21 billion kilometers from Earth, or about 141 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. It has, in fact, moved beyond our solar system into interstellar space. However, we can still communicate with Voyager across that distance. This week, the scientists and engineers on the Voyager team did something very special. They commanded the spacecraft to fire a set of 4 trajectory thrusters for the first time in 37 years to determine their ability to orient the spacecraft using a 10 millisecond pulses. After setting the commands on Tuesday, it took 19 hours and 35 minutes for the signal to reach Voyager. Then the Earthbound spacecraft team had to wait another 19 hours and 35 minutes to see if the spacecraft responded. It did. So what is that, 39 hours of waiting? And they sent the signal on Tuesday. Yeah, so Voyager 1 is now interstellar. Carl Sagan's legacy is interstellar and still working. And remember, Voyager wasn't projected to work past Saturn.
Right. It's way past end of life.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing that it's that far away. It's in like you said, interstellar space, and we can still control it. That is amazing.
And it was built in the 70s.
I didn't know that we could do that. And I guess that's why they did that test.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
you
interesting.
Think somebody was just like, I wonder. And like, I don't know
well, it sounds like they have a team.
Yeah.
It sounds like they have a team that's still monitoring it. And why wouldn't
I'm
you?
sure
Right.
They do. Do they still get like data from it, like photos?
I don't doubt it.
No photos. The cameras have been turned off for a while, but you still get
telemetry.
Certain sensors. I don't believe so. I think they're done for.
You get telemetry for sure.
I think they were turned off to save enough power to still get information from the other sensors and stuff.
Oh, okay.
They really wanted to know like what the cosmic radiation was like and stuff outside of the sun's influence.
Gotcha.
But it's heartening to see that Voyager 1 is still going. But Voyager 2, like we were trying to get to, is the image of the pale blue dot, and I'll show it here. We actually showed it when we did the Miles Grab episode. We showed pale blue dot, but here's pale blue dot. And I really appreciate this because if you listen to pale blue dot while looking at the pale blue dot, it really does kind of realize that actual reality.
Yeah.
But.
Because a lot of the videos on YouTube just like keep showing pictures of the Earth and they don't see the pale blue dot image. It's like this mote of dust suspended in a beam of sunlight.
I'd like to, if we can, spend just a little bit of time on his appearances on The Tonight Show with Carson, as well as Cosmos itself. So, The Tonight Show's got a really long legacy of having different kinds of hosts on and stuff, but what's his name? Johnny Carson was a real big fan of Sagan.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
so he had Sagan on as like a regular guest, and some of the most interesting episodes that we found had to do whenever Sagan was going to release a book, because Carson would like read the book beforehand and then they just talk about it, and it's so cool.
When Cosmos was coming out, the show, the TV show, also.
Absolutely. So I encourage every one of you to go through and watch these old antiquated 1970s and 1980s episodes of The Tonight Show just for Sagan in there, because he does the thing like John said of talking about the Cold War and stuff like that.
About like the disappearing rainforests and how you're losing an acre a second. And he's like standing there. He's like, you just lost an acre. He's like, a whole acre. Year after year. He's like, it's crazy.
He also defines cosmos on the word cosmos on Carson, and it's cool just like because people think of cosmos and it's just space, and actually it's everything.
Right.
So Cosmos the show itself was produced in 1980 on PBS, and for me, it really highlights one of the important things about public broadcasting. It's one of the things that if net neutrality goes away in the next couple of weeks, we'll lose the other side of public broadcasting. But PBS itself is, like John
Reading
put it
Rainbow.
perfectly along before we started the episode. Cosmos is like the Mr. Rogers of science, and it's true. In 1980, Sagan narrated this 13-part series, and it's called Cosmos: A Personal Voyage. The show's won Emmys and was seen by at least 500 million people across 60 different countries since its inception.
Nice.
He wrote a book to correspond with it called Cosmos: A Personal, or let's see, it's just called Cosmos.
Yeah.
And I just finished reading that book, and it's really good too.
Nice.
The
Audio or read.
huh? Oh, audio. So whatever.
No. It's
Why do you let it?
No, it's the same. I just can't do audiobooks, man.
It's a big
broken.
difference. I feel like, especially books for these, I feel like I do better in actual book form than audio.
I would probably end up reading a lot.
Because I read through Pale Blue Dot.
Pale Blue Dots. Cosmos is narrated by LeVar Burton,
Okay.
but the
He's
intro.
Reading Rainbow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The intro. There you go. It's not a PBS thing. Reading
Jordy.
Rainbow.
Well,
Yeah.
that's who I grew up on. I love
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. But yeah, I just finished Cosmos as well, and I've actually re-listened to them a bunch of times, just because they're good narrated. Pale Blue Dot is narrated by Sagan and another person, but the problem is it's really jarring when that
It is,
changes.
definitely.
Because you go from listening to Sagan and you're like, yeah, and then it's like, whoa, it's a new person. What's going on?
Is he not? Doesn't have.
He's not as good as Sagan.
Yeah.
No one's as good
no
as
one
Sagan.
has that same voice as Carl Sagan.
Pale Blue Dot is glorious.
So off of Cosmos, after he wrote that companion book, years later he wrote Pale Blue Dot, which is kind of a summary of where he saw science going in the future and what's going on. Like not only describing how we got to our understanding of a heliocentric some spiral armed part of the Milky Way galaxy, to where he thinks we can go as long as we fulfill these certain things. One of them at the time was nuclear deterrence and de-escalation. There's also the second chapter of Pale Blue Dot's really cool because Andrew and his wife, who co-wrote the book with him, says, look at the Pale Blue Dot and now imagine that a certain subsection of the species just believes that dot was created by an intelligent designer, and is that not absurd?
Right.
But then they go, if you don't find that absurd, find another dot and do that experiment again. I love that they tackle these really hard questions, but they tackle them with logic, and I think that's probably what upsets a lot of people about science, is that it just is just so logical. There's no we gotta take it on faith. Well, that's not how this works.
Yeah, read the good book, Josh. Cosmos, I meant.
Yeah, I'll lend it to you, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
As we kind of we've rambled all around Carl Sagan, but what do you guys think stands out about him? For what if you had to tell someone about Sagan, what would you tell them?
I would say how much he just kind of cares about what's happening on his planet. Wanting to bring awareness and stuff like that. It's pretty impressive, especially for the day and age he was in, to be such a forward thinker about the environment and stuff like that. Was not a really big thing. And then trying to push for people to make the change even back then, if they're not for the environment, don't elect them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the change you can make.
So there is
put these people into office.
There is that interview he did with Ted Turner that is fantastic, where Ted Turner's like, well, they're going to reinvest all that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm rich. I'm going to... And
yeah.
he's like, no, historically you don't.
But they lend it to people so they can buy houses and build debt, right?
Yeah, no.
But
I agree with John, though, yeah. What about you, Adam? What if you had to explain Sagan to someone and try and get them to go watch something Sagan?
I just like the same stuff we covered at the beginning. His ability to explain complex things. We were watching that fourth dimensional video.
Yeah.
I felt like it was like a kids show,
Right.
Almost,
but
right?
with really complex ideas.
Yeah, he's got visual aids, and he's good at explaining topics that are very complex. And I mean, we said it also just kind of like the way he talks, his voice is just, you enjoy listening to him.
He's almost comforting.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
And he does it without, like, you know how Mr. Rogers was comforting, but he's obviously condescending to a child? You know what I mean?
I don't know if I can call it condescending.
It doesn't have to be taken negatively. He's literally talking down to a child.
Not when he puts him on his lap. But
I like that. Yeah, we'll get into it later.
But I feel the same way about David Attenborough.
Or
Voice-wise.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Absolutely.
Neil deGrasse
Sure.
Tyson, same way.
I like his voice too. I like
Bill Nye to a certain extent.
Bill Nye's not the same though.
I've heard him narrate a
I mean,
bunch.
he's the same in the sense that he's very good at explaining things to children and to people that don't understand as much, you know.
He does come off a little condescending.
He can. Absolutely, yeah.
I guess that's one thing we forgot to mention. Not only was Carl Sagan this genius of a scientist, not only was he a great science communicator, he was Neil deGrasse Tyson's mentor, and he taught when he was teaching at Cornell. Bill Nye was in one of his classes, so and Bill Nye was like, this guy was my god. Like this guy was so inspirational to the science communicators that we all know and love today. It's hard not to talk about him.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think, my favorite part about Carl Sagan is not just that all of these amazing things, but the legacy he created.
Right.
So
Definitely.
we've probably rambled on enough about the man. I would like to do more of these in the future, like if we do Bill
Other
Nye,
people,
or if we do Neil deGrasse Tyson, or I would love to do Stephen Hawking with Peter, because I think you and him would have a great discussion about quantum mechanics and stuff like that.
It's too.
Well, I didn't say okay.
Yeah.
But we haven't had Peter on in a while. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but no, I would definitely be. I would definitely be down to do more episodes like this.
Yeah.
I mean, the other people too, right? Like Einstein.
Sure.
And,
Newton. We need to do a Newton episode. There's no reason not to. Mary Curie. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, and on the same note, I doubt this will be the last time we talk about Carl Sagan too.
Yeah.
So.
I forgot to mention during the Pale Blue Dot, in the Pale Blue Dot chapter where he does the Pale Blue Dot speech, he talks about the two people that calculated Voyager to turn around to look at the Earth. They were one of them was a JPL technician. It was a female, and then the other one was a female professor at Arizona State. I don't know why it was important to bring that up now. I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
Well.
Maybe it's because I said Mary Curie. But we will leave you guys with that. Is there something we missed about Sagan? Do you want to hear us talk about a specific other science communicator or scientist? Let us know. Other than that, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.